you really adopted the dog. I was born in it. Sir, yes, I do work. 106 of my Mike. He's on site.
What's going on, Blackish University? It is your boy B coming at you with another reaction video. This one's a little bit different. I wanted to take some time to really shine a light onto a murder case, a double murder case called the Delphi murders. It's the two little girls, Abby and Libby. They were in Indiana, and they were both murdered. And it's just an unfortunate story. And I thought I can hopefully bring something new to the table, information that I had that I just happened to come across a few years ago that I thought I got to the right person, but I never truly heard anything else about. So I thought this would be a good time to make a video to just bring some attention back to the original crime and hopefully get some information to the right people. So without further ado, let's get into this a bit more and learn a bit more about the story of Abby and Libby.
One winter day, and crime that changed everything. General Abigail Williams and Liberty German were reported missing.
He smiled all the time. They make people feel like
we're going to find who did this.
Our community is going through a lot of this with us. And they pray it to this day.
Let's find this guy. Now on TV 6 News Special, Delphi Daughters, the untold story of Abby and Libby.
This is the old Monon High Bridge along the trails in Delphi. It's here that Abigail Abby Williams and Liberty Libby German played, laughed, explored, made memories. They were in this area on the day they went missing and later found murdered. The killer is still on the loose. Someone out there knows something about this.
Yeah.
See, that's the part that just kills me. As a dad, I just do not know what I would do if my little girl went missing. My baby's 5 years old, and I could just only imagine that somebody out there knows something, and they're not saying something. So it might be small, right? You might recognize an audio clip, or recognize someone from the picture, or you heard something on social media, or had a conversation with the right person. But this is what gets me, and this is kind of my motivation to make the video. When I saw this, and it's like somebody out there knows something, and I happen to be a person that I think I might have met someone that checked a lot of the boxes as to someone that could be involved with this crime, and I'll break that down later, and I'm happy to share as much information as I can with anyone that's actively researching this as well. Let's get back to it.
What do you say to that somebody?
Say something, right? Silence is violence.
We pray every day that we'll have peace someday. We just ask that people just follow that instinct, that gut. Even if we just have a suspicion. Just call it in.
Abby and Libby did a lot together. Both girls loved music. They played the alto saxophone in their middle school band. Both loved photography and painting. The girls were set to play softball. Both shared a special friendship. It was Libby who managed to take a cell phone picture of a strange man on the bridge. He's the prime suspect.
They didn't leave each other's side. I don't know what happened out there that day. If there's a chance or an opportunity for one to break off or split or make a break for it or whatever, but
and you have to think about this. It's two girls that are of the age where they can make that decision to leave each other and part ways, and they're only going to get one of us. But, I would argue that, is there any, it seems to be a lot of evidence that's not being disclosed for whatever reason. I don't know if it's extremely graphic or if they're trying to reserve some information so they can help, accurately find someone that maybe they have details of the crime that haven't been released. But what what's the possibility that there was a second person that might have been involved? Because I have to say, the person that I recognize as someone from the second drawing that came out, I immediately recognized them when I saw the picture. But I immediately thought of another person because it was a tag team that was always together doing stuff. And there was a powerful, more aggressive one, and there was the kind of submissive second person. And as I kept thinking about this, just someone that considers myself a lifelong student, I thought about a lot of these crimes where you have someone, where you have this, kind of more aggressive leader of the pack, if you would, and then kind of the submissive person that's, in Chicago, what we would call a send-off, right? Someone you can send off to do smaller things that you don't want to take care of yourself. But I kept thinking about that. It's like, man, if this guy did do it, had some involvement with this crime, I'd be willing to bet that the second person was with him. And the funny thing is, the second person looks a little bit like the first drawing, the sketch that they came out with. Not for sure, but that was the thing. The first image that came out, I was like, could it be someone? I don't know, not enough to make a call. But the second one, and it turns out that was in fact the very first sketch that they came up with. That sketch looks nearly identical to someone that I think had some involvement, and the audio clip matches as well.
I look at it as, two young soldiers that stuck, cover each other's back, two best friends, I wouldn't leave my best friend's side, and neither did they.
There are no limits. Police are still looking for pieces of information. Billboards continue to alert people coast to coast not to forget the teenage girls. As people here remember the day, there was a call for a search.
Area last night, walking both sides of the creek bank. In Carroll County, police are set to regroup and restart the search for two missing girls.
Together, okay? And we recover more property in a quicker time. 21 We have found two bodies. We are investigating this as a crime scene. We suspect foul play.
State police and the FBI have been on the scene now for several hours. A number of units and teams have been here trying to gather information.
The bodies have been positively identified as Abigail J. Williams, 13, the Delphi area, and Liberty Rose Lynn Jordan, 14, of the Delphi area. This is considered a double homicide investigation.
The two girls discovered in the woods, authorities asking for your help tonight. Their last Snapchat and the image of a man authorities would like to talk to.
And they now have enough evidence to call him the prime suspect.
So, one thing I would ask is, are there any cameras, or were there any cameras that might have captured a late model dark Suburban that was traveling around this area, this wooded area around that time? I want to say a late 80s model, full body, long Suburban. I would imagine a little bit lowered. It doesn't look like your typical Suburban. It's not lifted. If anything, it might have been lowered. And it had very dark tints on it. Is it possible that you've seen this car through any footage? That's one thing that I would ask.
We do have some new information for you today. Liberty had the presence of mind to turn on her video camera. But there's enough there that somebody could recognize this person's voice.
And I've said this before, but this does, the person that I believe I recognize from that sketch does sound very close to that audio clip as well.
Okay, if you're watching, we'll find you.
There have been more than 11
1,000 tips come in to our command center.
Somebody knows something. Somebody has to know this person, recognize that voice.
It's not easy.
And when the person abruptly moved out of Indiana, I believe they went to North Carolina. They mentioned they had some family out there. They were kind of able to live off the grid. They were going to continue being a mobile mechanic, did some small engine repair, but he moved his entire family, which was kind of, it was very sketchy at the time, because they had moved from an area that was very close to where this crime scene was to another area in Indiana, and they were only there a month or two before they decided to up and leave the state and sell everything.
A lot of people are putting a lot of work on this, and we're hoping that the tips there, and we're going to find it. Right now, a tip hotline is open for you to take action. You can be anonymous. The number to call, 844-459-57.
I gotta say, I have a lot of problems with the tip line, and I know, I get it. You're probably getting calls from all over the place, right? But I have to say, I did call. I called the FBI tip line, and I was like, hey, I have some interesting information. I know someone. I gave her the backstory, and it seemed like they were questioning my how authentic my claim might be, or like questioning my kind of sanity, which was just mind-boggling that I'm trying to call in with information. And the lady was like, well, why would you think that? It's like, yo, I don't know. I'm just a regular person that called some guy to do some work on my truck, and he ended up being a very sketchy guy, and I did this work with him for weeks. I recognize him. I recognize his voice, and I recognize his picture from your sketch. And I also connected a few other dots, and it looks like he lived around that area. He's also someone that hikes, goes out to different forest preserves. He's somewhat of a racist, had a lot of Confederate flags, a lot of weapons. It was definitely something very sketchy about this guy. And even right now, I'm putting myself at risk because he knows where I live and my family live. And I might be one of the few people that can identify him. So, this is something, but I didn't like when I called. It seemed like the FBI person was like, yeah, I'll take a note and get it over to the boss. Thank you for calling. And I tried to go in detail. I left all of my real information. The funny thing is, I'm kind of a nut when it comes to legal contracts. And I was actually, this guy needed some help. He was moving into a place. And I did some barter work with him where I gave him a van that I wasn't using. Basically gave it to him and a couch set. And when I did that, I created a short contract, and I actually got a picture of his license. And the funny thing is, so I still have his government issued ID. But the thing that really helped me out with this, and which really kind of got my spidey sense going, is the address. The address on his original ID was not the address of where I went and where my truck was. It was actually another location that's also in Indiana, excuse me, and was within, a relatively close proximity to where these murders took place. So it's just too much of a coincidence to just remain silent, and it's something, if you're familiar with my channel, Blackish University, the modern day griot, I'm always talking about racism, discrimination, and I always say silence is violence, right? That's an old school quote. It's not always the people that are experiencing this that are the cause of this. It's a lot of times what perpetuates this is there's people that remain silent when they see a crime happening. They don't speak up to defend others. So I just thought, that's the first thing. As a father, I was like, you know what? I have to say something, even if it's falling on deaf ears. I need to get this out there. And to be honest, I never heard anything back. I don't even know if the Indiana State Police communicated with the FBI. Was this considered a credible lead? Were there any local law enforcement? Does the family know that somebody called and said, hey, I recognize the guy, and he is a sketchy guy, and he does sound like that? Was that information even communicated or shared? So, I'd like to do my part, and I'm willing to share that information with someone if they're interested, right? Communicate with me, and I'll give you as much info as I can, even though it's putting my family in jeopardy as well.
6. With every sunrise, the families of the girls killed wonder if the new day will bring news of an arrest. Waiting for justice for Delphi's daughters.
It happened in Indiana, and it's something that's normally referred to as the Delphi murders. Being a newer YouTuber, I go through different channels, I look at things of interest to me, and I keep coming back to the Delphi murders. It's just such an unfortunate story. These two little girls, and I'll add a link here so you can learn a bit more about this story. But as a father, I have a 5-year-old daughter. I don't know how I would react if my daughter was missing, let alone murdered. And I'm watching this Delphi Daughters, The Untold Story of Abby and Libby, and one of the mothers is just on here, just grieving, and the word just stuck out to me. It's just somebody out there knows something. Somebody knows something that could break this case open. And the first thing I think about, especially for someone that has somewhat of a legal background and understands what happens with a lot of these cases, is things get lost in not just translation, but lost in the shuffle. There's different law enforcement agencies, from state troopers to local police departments to FBI. You have an FBI hotline, you have the state trooper hotline, you have the number from the missing posters. And it's kind of hard to coordinate. You need to have a team in place that can vet these different leads that are coming in, these different, you got a bunch of Duck Tracy, the fake Dick Tracy investigation squads out here that are also looking into this. And, more power to them, because I also wanted to take some time to shine some light on this case and hopefully bring some new information to the table. Imagine my shock a few years ago when I'm actually doing something in my home, and I see a picture pop on the screen, and this is the updated version of the sketch. That turns out that this was their first version that they put out. For some reason or another, they changed it. Imagine my surprise a few years ago when I look on the screen and I immediately know who it is. Yeah, shocking, right? And I know a lot of you out there are like, what? What? This isn't for YouTube, right? Call the FBI, call the police, call her mom. I did. But I also realized that things get lost in the shuffle. Who's to say that the lead that I called in with didn't get to the right person or the right agency? Maybe there's discrepancy between the information that the agencies have. And I know there's legal rights as well to somebody who's, allegedly might have committed a crime. So just because you think someone looks like a poster, right? There's been a lot of leads. I think they said 2,000 leads have come in. And I'm sure a lot of people, everyone feels that their lead is credible. It doesn't mean that it's correct, right? Or it could be a person of interest for XYZ. It doesn't mean that they're the actual murderer. But being a father, I thought it was my duty to put some new information out there, since there's a lot of people that are investigating this, and let them make some decisions, and hopefully it could get to the right person if it hasn't already. Now, I won't put anyone's name out there. I'm also putting my own family at risk, because if the killer is watching and I happen to be correct, he does know where I live, and I have my own family. But, I'm a big boy. I can protect myself. But I'd like to give you guys the story as to what happened and why I think I came across the person or people that might have something to do with these murders. So I'll start at somewhat at the beginning. I'm a fan of Hummers, right? I love Hummer trucks. I've loved Hummers my entire life. That's my version of a midlife crisis shiny red Corvette, right? I'm 39 years old. I'm about 6'1", 330, 340 pounds. I'm not a small guy. I'm not getting in a Corvette or a Jaguar or anything like that. My thing is a big SUV. I've had Escalades, Suburbans, and at the time, I have my own H1 Hummer now. But at the time, I had a vehicle that was it was technically a 1987 Suburban, Chevy Suburban. They called it a Granny 4-speed. This was an old farm vehicle that this Cook County sheriff modified and did fabrication work to make it look like a Hummer, an H1 Hummer. I thought it was the coolest thing, and at the time, it was the best we can do, and my wife actually bought it for me for a few $1,000s from this Cook County sheriff. So we bring the car out to the western suburbs of Chicago, and I just struggled finding people that can work on it. Everyone thought that it was an H1 Hummer, but it was actually the guts of it were actually a Chevy Suburban, an 87 Suburban. So occasionally I would look for someone who can come and do some mobile work. Take a look at the car, see if you can get it, turn the engine over. I ordered a bunch of accessories, and I'm always involved with some sort of fun project, right? So I'm on Craigslist. And yes, this is how I came in contact with these people. I was on Craigslist looking for a mobile mechanic, and I find this guy who the vehicle that he uses as a mobile mechanic is a 1987 Chevy Suburban. It's either 87 or 89, but it's a late 80s model Chevy Suburban. So I'm like, okay, this guy has the same exact vehicle. The guts of the vehicle are the same. He's going to be more familiar with doing this type of work. So I reach out to him on Craigslist. And yes, I do have all of this communication saved somewhere on my computer. I reach out to the guy, and he's like, "Yo, I'm actually in Indiana, but for the right price, I can come out and do work. I'm not one that's known to be cheap. I like, I feel like there's some things that are worth paying for. I used to own a marketing company, a small store. I had, I'm an entrepreneur in itself." So I don't mind taking risks like that. So I said, you know what? You're going to be somebody that's more familiar with this type of project, so I'll pay you an increased dollar amount to come out here. So the guy comes out, and I get to meet him, and it turns out this is the guy that I believe is on the poster, the drawing, the updated version that came out. So he comes out. He has a second person with him. The second person looks more like the first sketch he came out with. Not as large as that person appears in just the head drawing, the upper body, but this is a shorter, there's a shorter person that's kind of like, it's a very weird scenario. It's kind of like this person's, it's his right-hand man, but it's almost like a son, but it's somebody who's close in age that for some reason this guy takes care of. I don't know if he was not special, but he was some form of a mute or deaf. The other person, not the one that I'm referring to. And this guy is just, kind of rubs you the wrong way. But, I gave him the money. He seemed kind of down and out, and he needed money to get to and from Indiana. So I gave him a little money, and then we came up with a deal. As I had I have a buddy who has a band. They do Christian rock kind of deal, and they travel to different churches. And he occasionally gets things from them, right, that they don't need. And he had this church van. I ended up giving him a few $100s, and I wasn't using this church van anymore, so I just had it parked in a garage. I was paying for, not a garage, a yard out in the western suburbs of Chicago. So as we're communicating, the guy turns out he's looking for another vehicle. He's just moving, so he needs some furniture. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Maybe we can have some sort of barter agreement. So sure enough, we're about to come up with this agreement. And as I mentioned before, I'm a big fan of contracts. So I asked the guy, hey, I need to see your identification because I'm going to create a bill of sale and I'm going to try to do this work so you're not just driving a vehicle in my name that you never titled. So I actually took a picture of this guy's license, which actually kind of really feeds into the story if you stay with me. So I take a picture of this guy's license and we complete the bill of sale and I give him this church vehicle. Well, this guy is just all sorts of backwards and shady, and I can get to that in more detail later. But he comes out a second time, and he actually gets the truck working. It turns out he's a pretty skilled mechanic, but he's pretty country, sloppy hood. If I could better describe it, kind of. Definitely Indiana, but he has that kind of not southern, but definitely an accent, kind of a trashy kind of person. Sorry, excuse my French, right? But he comes in, we're doing this exchange of work. He gets the truck going, but then we come up with an agreement that I would give him, like $400 or $500 a week if he could constantly do some work on his truck. It involved fabrication, a bunch of accessories, painting the truck, lifting it, switching it to automatic transmission. I mean, it was a ton of work. So we agree at AAA, towed the truck out to him in Indiana. Well, it turns out we go to a different address. I end up going in and kind of, saying hi, trying to make sure that my truck will be in a safe place. And this guy's in pretty much this empty apartment. So one of the things that we did is I gave him some brand new couches that I had that we weren't using. So brand new couches, and I gave him this unmarked van. Well, it was marked as a church van, but it was open in the back with cargo space. Never saw the van again. He said that he got rid of it or sold it to someone. But I noticed right away that he just moved in. And I noticed the couches that we give them. But the first thing that they talked about was how often his son and this person that he takes care of and him like to go camping. And they had snakes and cats and all this weird stuff. Well, I got a little bit worried because, I'm a cool guy. I could hang out. I smoke a little bit, have a little drink here and there, nothing too major. But I got a little bit weirded out when, he was having... There was occasionally bits that he would drop about white supremacy and bits that he would drop about his weapon collection. And then when I got to his house, he had Confederate flags. This guy bragged about the amount of weapons that he had, but he was just an unstable guy, and it started making me very insecure about being there. It's just off, and if you're anybody, I'm from the inner city of Chicago, we have that spidey sense, right? I know when someone's off and I just, all right, let me tuck in my stuff and start making my move to a public place because this could be a sketchy situation. I have that balance of street smarts and Chicago street smarts and book smarts, my spidey sense was tingling, to say the least. And I dealt with this guy, and he ended up being more or less a scam artist. He took a bunch of money, but there was a bunch of weird things that came up. One was that this guy, he wanted all money to be given to him through a Walmart green dot card. He didn't use any banks. And I'm like, yo, man, hey, you're about an hour or so away. I can't always come here and give you cash. I will sometimes because I want to check on the progress of the truck. But he gave me some numbers and we can go to a Walmart in the western suburbs and add this money to a green dot card and that's how he was sustaining himself outside of mobile mechanic projects. But just a few things were just off with the guy. I even hired his deaf-mute friend to go to another property I have in Chicago and sweep and do some stuff, and it was just an unusual relationship that they had. But anyway, one day I'm at home, and I just I see the update. Somehow I come across it, and just right away I see this guy's picture in the drawing, and he has that kind of a distinct face. If I'm one of those people that I'm really good with faces, but I was seeing this guy constantly, and I just did a second look, and I'm just like, oh, that's this guy, and I'm like, what is this about? And I'm like, oh, this is updated from the Delphi murders, and I just start looking through it, and I'm just like, hey, babe. My wife comes out, and she's like, oh, look at this guy. I'm like, that's not him. That's a picture. This is actually somebody who's wanted for a double murder. Even my son comes down, that's 13. I'm like, hey, who does this look like? The first name he comes up with. And I'm just like, all right, now this is weird. Well, I start thinking back, and again, I love I love not just a conspiracy theory, but I love looking at investigations. I like psychological thrillers, but I also have somewhat of a legal background, not a formal one, but I am trying to finish a degree, pursue another degree. Long story, but I'm very familiar with legal terminology, and I like looking over cases. Like I looked over the Kyle Rittenhouse case, and I love, just kind of taking that devil's advocate position and trying to argue the other point. And I was trying to tell people in the minority community, like, Kyle Rittenhouse, he's going to get off. This was self-defense. Do I believe it was self-defense? No. I think he's an idiotic kid who had a weapon somewhere he shouldn't be, and he had an excellent defense team. And I think they lied about the one thing that they needed to. They needed to lie about Joseph Rosenbaum actually making a threat, saying that if I catch you, I'm going to kill you. Without that, they wouldn't have had the self-defense, and it wouldn't have continued, and he would have been charged with murder. Do I think that guy actually threatened him? No. I think everything else from that day is on camera. It was being recorded. And even the time frame where he says that happened, there was a cameraman with him, but we have nothing like that on camera. But I knew, and so I like to do those sort of reactions as well. But in this case, I was like, well, let me do some research on this before I jump the gun. I remembered I have a picture of this guy's identification. So let's take a look at his ID and see what I can take from it. Maybe I'll do a few Google searches, right? So I Googled the name, not much. One thing that immediately stood out to me is if you know anything about old school like serial killers, there's an argument that a lot of them use a middle name, right? Like John Wayne Gacy, or they have a middle portion. This guy uses the middle name. There's 3 parts to his name. But the one thing that stood out right away was his address. It wasn't the address that I went to see him where my truck was. It was another address in Indiana. So I assumed, okay, it's only right. This guy had a new property, right? Or he was renting this home. It's probably where he lived before, and he didn't update his address. I met him in that transition period. Well, I'm Googling the address, and I just put 2 and 2 together, and I pull up Google Maps. It turns out this guy lives within pretty close proximity to where the Delphi murders took place. Okay, that's, check that box, right? So I'm like, okay, this guy, anything could happen, right? Maybe he moved for XYZ. Maybe he looks alike. There's some people that say all black people look alike, or all Mexican people look alike. And what does Dave Chappelle say? He says, we call those people the police. But no, not all white people look alike. I know what features are, and I was seeing this guy all the time. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's just a coincidence. But then I'm working with this guy, and he's got a bunch of just shady stories, shady things that he's been a part of. He's just one of those guys that makes you feel uncomfortable. Where I stopped going over there, especially with my wife and my son. I even drove over there once with my mom. But all of a sudden, he's moving again. Right? I know you just moved here because I gave you your couches. Now you're selling everything you own, including your truck, and he's moving to another state. Didn't do much work on my truck. He took a bunch of money. We lost a bunch of money on that. But I'm like, why are you moving? Yeah, blah, 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 opportunity. I know somebody here and there. And that's when things were a little bit odd. This guy had a whole, like a weapons shed in his backyard with a Confederate flag over it. A bunch of weapons, bunch of stuff, bunch of random engines and motors, and almost like a Sanford and Son scrapyard, but it looked like he was doing like small motor repair. But he sold everything, and he was preparing to move to North Carolina from Indiana. He was in an area, not Gary, but it was about 30 or 40 minutes, I believe, away from where he was. But moving again within a 1 or 2 month period, I just thought was extremely unusual. And that's when I decided to reach out. Oh, and there was another thing. As I started telling people, like, hey, I think I didn't recognize this guy. And they're all like, really? And I'm like, yeah, but, I don't know. I don't want to be off about something like this. But even look at this original video. And that's when I came across the sound clip. I go and I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize it was right. I go in, I play the sound clip. It not just looks like him, that's his voice. He speaks like that. He had this very, and again, excuse my French, but he had this kind of trashy, he wasn't just your typical white suburbia. This is somebody who came from a hard life, was more Confederate flag, scrapyard, people walking around barefoot. He had this kind of a trashy place, a trashy house, smelled, just one of those kind of environments. But he had that voice. And I was like, wow, if this isn't compelling evidence, at least worth exploring, then I wouldn't be a father or a man if I didn't reach out to the right authorities. I have a good friend of mine who's a state trooper. And I reached out to him. He's actually a state trooper. One of the reasons is because of me. When we were younger, we went to, it was basically like a law enforcement career day, almost like a job fair. And the FBI was there, a variety of different police forces, state troopers, National Guard, military. And my buddy ended up graduating, and he became an Illinois state trooper. And he moved up the ranks. So I thought it would be worth reaching out to him directly. But at the time, this person was moving. That guy was moving. He was getting rid of everything. I was able to get back there and get my truck, but unfortunately, I don't know where he moved to. All I know is it was actually North Carolina. But I have the documents, and I have I was looking for a sound clip because I normally don't give most people my phone number. I give them a Google Voice number. So I thought, okay, if this guy called or left any sort of a message, I would have his recording for life, right? It's just saved within Google Voice. I can download that audio clip and send it to the state police or the FBI. They should have tools that would allow them to analyze that and see if it, compare that. But there was nothing. There was nothing. I think at one point, we definitely exchanged some text, but I didn't have a sound clip, at least one that I could find right away. But I do have a picture of his ID. I do have, I do know where he was living in Indiana, and I know his previous address that was closer to where the Delphi murders took place. I know that they were avid campers. They always went on hikes. They always went on trail hikes. They always went to forest preserves. That's all they talked about besides shooting. And but I also know that they were sketchy. And the two guys, were always together. The guy that's the second one that they said was the first drawing that they did, but he kind of has that look and the kind of curlier hair. The guy I met had the exact same face, but his head was shaved. I do have his picture, but the one that was always with him, I don't understand the relationship. It was almost kind of like a Of Mice and Men deal or something. Like this guy was, he used, it wasn't even sign language. It was like kind of like a hood, like in the Spanish community they call Spanglish. His friend didn't speak sign and he didn't speak, so they used kind of like a mixture to communicate. But he would take care of this guy. And I don't know what the relationship was because he had a wife, but it was very weird how they had their setup. Extremely weird, if I would. But this guy lived in like a coach house in the back. But they were always desperate for money, kind of grimy lifestyle. Just too many things add up. But the voice, the video clip, the sound clip sounds like him. It looks like him. He lived in this area. He was super grimy, and he seems to check all the boxes. So hopefully this information, can help someone, at least get maybe not a suspect, but just know that there's someone that does fit that description, that does check some boxes. And to be honest, I don't know how far state troopers really went with this. My friend, I know he knows that I'm credible and he would have checked into this. But there's only so much you can do, right? You can't get a warrant just off circumstantial evidence. You can't cross state lines to track somebody down if you really don't have any evidence. So I don't know what they would do, but I thought it was weird that nobody reached back out to me. I thought I would get a call from the FBI, get a call from the Indiana State Troopers, something like, hey, thanks for the tip. I think this guy checks a lot of boxes, but, he had an alibi for this time frame. Or, hey, we can't really pursue this because of this. I heard nothing. So anytime I circle back and I'm just kind of go back to hashtag Delphi murders or just see what's going on, has this been solved? It's like I see a mom crying and she's just like, I know there's somebody out there that knows something. I know somebody out there recognizes someone. Someone out there has some information. And I keep thinking like, man, I can only imagine if that was me or somebody I know. So, hey, feel free to message me through here or communicate if you want any additional information or put someone in contact with me if you need. I'm more than happy to share some of the information that I have. Obviously, I can't, I don't want to share personal information about someone who's, we don't know if they've committed a crime, but I'm more than happy to get that over to law enforcement or to your legal team. But hey, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll definitely share some information here in a second about the murders in general. And if you have any information, use their contact line to reach out, and let's try to get some justice for these little girls.